In the heart of winter, a thick blanket of snow covered the small town of Eldridge. The train station stood empty and quiet, with only the sound of the wind howling through the night. The last train of the evening was set to leave at midnight, a solitary journey for those who had nowhere else to go. One frigid night, a young woman named Claire arrived at the station, her breath visible in the freezing air. She had missed her bus and was determined to catch the last train home. As she waited on the platform, the flickering lights cast eerie shadows, and an unsettling feeling crept into her mind. At precisely midnight, the train arrived with a low rumble, its headlights cutting through the darkness. Claire climbed aboard, grateful for the warmth inside. The train was almost empty, save for a few weary passengers scattered throughout the car. She settled into her seat and watched as the station faded into the distance. As the train sped along the tracks, Claire noticed something odd about the other passengers. They sat perfectly still, their faces expressionless and pale. A chill ran down her spine, but she shrugged it off, attributing it to her overactive imagination. But as the train continued, she felt a creeping dread settle over her. The air grew heavy, and the lights flickered ominously. Glancing out the window, she saw nothing but darkness. No trees, no buildings, just an endless void. Suddenly, the train lurched violently, and the lights went out. Panic surged through Claire as she fumbled for her phone, but it was dead. In the pitch blackness, she could hear faint whispers, disembodied voices echoing through the car. They were calling her name. With trembling hands, she reached for the emergency exit, desperate to escape. As she moved, she caught sight of the passengers, now staring directly at her, their eyes hollow and unblinking. Fear coursed through her veins, and she bolted for the door. Just as she reached it, the train screeched to a halt. The doors opened, revealing an icy night. Claire hesitated, torn between the unknown of the outside world and the eerie stillness of the train. But the whispers grew louder, a cacophony of voices urging her to flee. With no other choice, she jumped off the train and stumbled into the snow, gasping for breath. As she turned back, the train disappeared into the darkness, leaving her alone in the freezing night. The next morning, the townsfolk found her shivering near the tracks, dazed and confused. When they asked about the train, she realized with horror that no one else had seen it. The last train home was a ghostly illusion, a haunting reminder that some journeys are better left untaken. And as Claire returned to her normal life, she could never shake the feeling that the whispers would return, forever beckoning her back to the night of the last train. In a quiet suburban neighborhood, there stood an old, dilapidated house that had long been abandoned. The windows were cracked, and the paint peeled from the walls, but the mirror on the second floor remained strangely intact. Local kids told stories about the house being haunted, particularly the mirror, claimed to show not just reflections, but visions of the past. One rainy afternoon, a curious teenager named Ben dared his friends to explore the house. They laughed at the idea, but Ben was insistent. "What if it's true? What if we see something amazing?" His friends reluctantly agreed, wanting to impress him. As they entered the house, the air felt thick and musty. The floorboards creaked ominously beneath their weight, and a shiver ran down Ben's spine. They made their way to the second floor, where the fabled mirror hung in an empty room, surrounded by dust and cobwebs. "Let's see what it shows," Ben said, his voice barely above a whisper. He stepped in front of the mirror, the others gathering around him. At first, it reflected only their anxious faces, but soon, something shifted in the glass. Ben gasped as the mirror showed a scene from long ago. A family standing in the very room, laughing and playing. But as they watched, the laughter turned to horror, the family's expressions twisting into fear. A shadowy figure loomed behind them, its eyes glowing with malice. "Turn it off! Turn it off!" one of his friends shouted, but it was too late. The mirror flickered, and suddenly, Ben felt a cold hand grasp his shoulder. He turned, but there was nothing there. When he looked back at the mirror, the shadow was now standing directly behind him. Panic surged through him as he stumbled back, the room spinning. The mirror reflected a warped version of reality, a place where the family was trapped, and he was next. The friends screamed, desperate to escape, but the mirror seemed to pull Ben closer, its dark energy ensnaring him. With a final surge of will, Ben broke free from the mirror's grasp, but not before catching a glimpse of the family's fate, trapped forever in the glass, their eyes pleading for help. The friends bolted from the house, their hearts pounding, vowing never to return. Months later, Ben moved away, but the image of the mirror haunted him. He would often see fleeting glimpses of the shadow in his peripheral vision, a reminder that some reflections are better left unseen. And in the abandoned house, the mirror waited, hungry for the next curious soul to approach, to reveal the horrors that lay beyond its surface. The village of Black Hollow lay shrouded in mist, with thick trees encircling its borders like a fortress. No one dared to venture into the woods after sunset. They all knew the legends of the Hollow Witch. They said she roamed the forest, cursing anyone who dared to cross her path. For decades, her presence had haunted the village, and every year, someone would disappear without a trace. One fateful autumn, a group of adventurous teens, Maya, Jason, and Liz, decided to test their courage. They had grown tired of the stories that kept everyone indoors and were determined to explore the woods during the witching hour. Armed with flashlights and a sense of invincibility, they entered the forest, the crunch of leaves underfoot echoing ominously in the stillness. As they wandered deeper into the woods, an unsettling silence enveloped them. It was as if the forest itself was holding its breath. Suddenly, a chilling wind swept through the trees, extinguishing their flashlights. Panic gripped them, and they fumbled to turn them back on. When the light flickered back to life, they found themselves surrounded by thick fog. "Did you hear that?" Liz whispered, her voice trembling. They listened closely, and faint laughter echoed through the mist, a sound both melodic and sinister. "Let's go back," Maya urged, her instincts screaming at her. But Jason, ever the skeptic, laughed it off. "It's just a trick of the wind. We're fine." As they pressed on, the laughter grew louder, morphing into cries of despair. The friends exchanged terrified glances, realizing they were not alone. The trees shifted, their branches twisting like gnarled hands, and the whispers beckoned them deeper into the shadows. Suddenly, they stumbled upon an ancient stone altar, overgrown with vines. Intricate symbols carved into its surface pulsed with a dark energy. Without warning, a figure emerged from the fog, a woman dressed in tattered rags, her hair a wild tangle, eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. "Why have you come here?" she hissed, her voice echoing through the trees. "You dare disturb my slumber?" Fear paralyzed them as they stood frozen in place. Jason attempted to speak, but no words came out. The witch extended her hand, revealing a shimmering amulet that pulsed like a heartbeat. "You have trespassed on sacred ground. Your soul shall be mine." Desperate to escape, Maya grabbed Liz's hand, and they turned to run. But the forest twisted around them, branches reaching out to ensnare them. Jason fell behind, his terrified screams swallowed by the fog. The girls sprinted through the woods, adrenaline pumping, but the laughter echoed in their ears. They could feel the witch's presence, hot on their heels. Just as they reached the edge of the forest, a blinding light engulfed them, and they stumbled onto the village path. Breathless and shaken, they turned back to see the forest looming ominously behind them, the mist rolling in like a tide. They vowed never to speak of that night again, but the chilling laughter of the Hollow Witch haunted their dreams. And every year, as autumn returned, the village mourned the loss of another soul who dared to venture into Black Hollow.